Hello, and welcome back to the sim. In this one, we're finally here and on the runway because we're going to set up our Bravo throttle quadrant and at least get off, get up in the air, and maybe get in a circuit. So let's go ahead and jump into the cockpit and see how we've set up our Bravo throttle quadrant. So here we are inside of our cockpit, and of course we want to map our Bravo throttle quadrant and all of its functions, LEDs, lights, everything using SPAD.next. So of course that means let's jump into SPAD.next. I'm running the alpha 091237 as of this video. I have it because I want the LEDs and all the other cool stuff. So remember, for devices inside, you're going to find joysticks. You're going to have Honeycomb. Use custom configuration instead of SPAD.next built in. So when you do an upgrade, it may ask you, do you want to use your legacy setup that you had for your Honeycomb, meaning how the buttons and switches are configured? If you say yes, you're not going to get the LEDs. So if you did that, you got to come all the way back inside of here. So as you can see, it's off, which means I have it. So when I come into my joysticks page, I have the Bravo throttle quadrant and the Bravo switches. So there's two pieces to it. Don't worry, it's one big device. Just the same way that the UI gets broken up for the TCQ add-ons, same thing happens for the Bravo throttle quadrant. So if you already know what you're doing and you just want to grab the snippet and you know how to get through it, figure it out, you just want to download it. Remember, only if you're on the alpha will you have access to this. But head over to, by clicking on a button, head over to the online snippets. I like to make it a little bit bigger. You want the Bravo throttle quadrant. You want the complete device. Now, what you can do is you can search for Les O'Reilly. And you're going to find the PMDG 737 Honeycomb Bravo. You could also uncheck only for current aircraft because I did publish it for all aircraft due to the fact that I don't want to load every possible PMDG livery in. So anyway, you'll find it MSFS PMDG 737 Honeycomb Bravo and complete device. So you're going to click OK. And then you're going to replace all events for this device. And as that's going to change both the TQ page and the switches page. All right, so that's all you had to do. Boom, you're ready to go. Enjoy it. Or stick around and see actually how we went through and assigned everything and what is doing what. First up, we're going to cover what I'm doing with the buttons and throttles. Number 9 is the thrust reverser for engine 9. So that would be if one of these throttles was sitting on this mount. When you pull that up, that would be button number 9. When we come to button 10, here what you're going to find is we've set up our thrust reverser. Now to do this, what I found has worked is you send throttle decrease, parameter 25 or 0, it will move it. But then we're putting in a pause. So add action, pause, delay, and we're doing 2 seconds and then we send the event for 1,000. So it seems with the thrust reversers, it needs to arm before you can take it full. And I found that with 2 seconds, works great. When that switch turns off, we will send the throttle 1 cut event so that it will turn the thrust reversers off. And again, it takes a moment when they go down for it to spool down and then finally drop. We copy pasted and it changed to throttle 2 decrease or decrement of 25, 1000, and then we throttle cut again. 12 would be the throttle axis, which we have nothing mapped to, if it had a thrust reverser on it. 22 is the trim up. So that's the wheel. So the wheel, trim up and trim down, is button 22 and 23. And so for those, I'm using the event control stand trim wheel and we're using the mouse up and mouse down events. So same thing as if we were to use a mouse up. So to find these, we simply would go Add Action, Send Simulation Event, highlight the 737 NGXU events, and then simply I just typed in trim. And of course, it breaks it down. Control stand, we've got our trim stabilizers, and we have our trim wheel. So we selected the trim wheel, and from the events, we used the same way we would interact with the wheel. We'd use, well, the mouse wheel. And once we added that, it automatically puts in the value. Mouse wheel down is 8192. So again, using that wonderful event system. 24 is this axis, the Speedbrake axis, and the detent, because it shows up as a switch. 25 would be this axis detent, which we also have not in use, and you see it lit up because I have it in the down position with the guard on. 26 is the throttle in the detent. And what I decided to do with it was use that to get us our event control stand engine start lever. The engine start lever are the cutoff switches. So the idle and cutoff switches here on the control pedestal. So these we've gone ahead and we've mapped inside of SPAD to when these go into the detents. So that's how we can do an engine cutoff. We're in idle and we will push it down to cut the engine off. And what you're going to notice is that when the switch goes on, we want the event stand, so control stand, engine 1 start lever, and event 1 parameter for when it goes on. So as far as the cutoff switch is concerned, the down position or the cutoff position is parameter 1, so set on 1. And the idle or up position is the 0 position. We copied, we pasted, and then we simply clicked on these and we moved down from 1 to 2, and we did that on both entries. 28, that would be the 5th axis. Again, nothing is assigned to it. 29 is not the flaps down axis. That would be the button if it was on this engine. Button 30 is our ToGa switch. And so for our ToGa switch, what we did there was, again, we've sent an event and we clicked on it. And when we came in, we searched for ToGa. And then we found our control stand ToGa 1 switch. So that's the one on the left throttle. Selected that, and the same way we would interact with it, it is a single click with the left mouse button. And that'll generate the code that gets sent. This is the weird one where for some reason they jump buttons, and 33 came to the flap detent. 48 would be the 4th engine axis or 5th overall axis for a ToGa button on it. Coming to our first axis, we set up our Speedbrake. We used the standard axis, so that was simply doing an add event, standard axis, and then we came on down and we found our spoilers. So for our spoilers, for full spoilers, we moved the axis all the way to the bottom and we set full spoilers. We moved the axis to where we wanted our arm position to be, and we set our arm position. And then for no spoilers, we went ahead and we set that at 0. So it all depends where you want that arm to be, and once you've set it, you go ahead and you hit save. We have nothing assigned to the second axis. The third axis we changed to throttle 1, and we changed the label. So we came here to label, we named it throttle 1, we hit submit. For this, we're doing a custom axis. Now I've used this in the past with other planes, including the CRJ, so I just copied and pasted it. But to do these, it's an add event, it's a custom axis, And now what you would be doing is setting up the range definition, the rescale values, and the target data. So when you look at this, you'll see that I had a range definition, yes. And the reason for that is I wanted it to go from 0 at the bottom to 1023 at the top. So I hit set, moved up to here, I hit set. And then what I did was I rescaled the value from negative 16,383 to positive 16,383. And this is what the PMDG expects to be coming in on these axes. We did the throttle 1 axis set external 1 because these are the newer Microsoft Flight Sim external axes. We enabled the axis value and we enabled the raw rescaled value so that it uses the rescale value. You'll notice if you had this off, those aren't available. You turn this off, now this is available, so it's using the axis value, but now we are using the raw rescaled value. Copy this event, come over here, and we would paste it. And then all we would have had to do was come in and change it from throttle 1 axis set EX1 to throttle 2 axis set EX1. So then we move on to this axis, which is set to nothing, and then for flaps. Flaps, we use the trusty good old standard axis. Selection event was flap. It has an auto detent, right? And so again, all we had to do here for auto detent was move our axis to the full down position at the bottom, hit set, move it all the way up to the top, hit set for full up, and click OK. And on the Bravo, you're going to find that the flaps, if you position it in the middle, these will line up perfectly. So you'll get flaps 5, flaps 2, flaps 10, flaps 15. All those flap settings are going to line up perfectly if you keep the middle of the flap lever in line with the marking on the inside of the axis. Now we're going to come to the switches. And in the switches, we have a lot more going on. On the actual knob itself, we have assigned no events. So there's no events no matter which position the knob is in, because when we come over to the encoder, you're going to see that we've used conditions, and those conditions are going to check the position of the other button. So it's looking at what position this button or this switch is in, 17 through 21, and based on that, it will send an event, and it ends processing. So here, we're picking our event MCP. So again, I needed the speed selector for this position. So all I did was I came here, I typed in MCP, covered the NGXU, and you'll notice now all my MCP events are filtered down. And for all of the knobs, they're selectors. So I needed the speed selector. So I had selected it. And then we interact with the mouse wheel. So a clockwise event is a mouse wheel up. And a counterclockwise event is a mouse wheel down event. So then we copy, pasted, change the value in the condition from button 17 to button 18, and we change the event from speed selector to course selector. On 19, we change it to heading selector. On 20, we change it to VS selector. For the condition of 21, we set it to MCP altitude selector. Then I went ahead and I set up my events for the 5 settings, but using the counterclockwise event. So again, add event, tuner clockwise event, or add event, tuner counterclockwise event. So we added the condition, we went to the device, which is actually under local in this case, then we went to devices, then I went to my Bravo switches, and we've got those buttons. So if it was button 17, and that equaled a 1, that was our condition. And then we added the action, send simulation event, MCP, and that was our speed on 17, the bottommost switch. So we scroll down, we found speed selector, we selected here, and that would be a mouse wheel down event. It gives us our 8192. We clicked OK, and then we set end processing. The purpose of this is because we have a whole bunch of events on the same like turning of the knob. Once it confirms one of these conditions, it will stop checking any more conditions in the list until the next turn of the knob, and then it will start over. For each one of our autopilot buttons, we set up 3 events. We set up a change button light, so add event, change button light, and for the condition, we knew we needed to look at the MCP, and again, we get to be able to come over to our NGXU. We can scroll down. You could actually go with the glare shield and mode control panel annunciators, and you'll see that it's real easy to find your different annunciators. Annunciators are basically LEDs. And so for the heading, we selected heading select, and we said when it was equal to 0, we're going to turn the LED off. And then we copied and pasted, and then I changed this to a 1, and then I changed this to a button light on permanent. And what permanent does is it will turn that LED on and leave it on. So just like that, our LEDs work. And so if we turn on our heading mode for our autopilot, our LED comes on. The button itself. So same thing, add event. We did a button pressed short, so that way it leaves the ability to add along, like say syncing your heading bug to your current heading. We went button press short. We added an action, send simulation event, NGXU, and again, I looked up the MCP because I know those events are on the MCP, and I came down to the heading select switch. We selected it, and again, we went to our list for left mouse button press. And boom, just like that, we clicked OK, and it added our event. So I'm going to get rid of that. I don't need 2 events. So once I did that, I came here, and I clicked on the copy all events. And then we came to the nav, and we did a paste all. And once we had them pasted, we basically came in and we changed the condition from heading to LNAV in this case. And then we came here, we changed heading to LNAV. And then we came here and we changed it from heading switch to LNAV switch. And once that was done, we had everything. So on approach, we set it up for approach mode, and again, approach for the annunciators and approach switch. For reverse, since I'm not really going to fly any back courses, I decided to use that for our VNAV button. So I've applied the VNAV LEDs and the VNAV switch. For the altitude button, we've gone ahead for the altitude switch and the altitude LED, VS, same thing, doing the VS LEDs. And then for IAS, we went ahead and chose to go with flight level change mode instead of speed mode. Since you have those 2 options, I chose to go with flight level change. On the autopilot, we are turning on the Command A switch. For those that want to also control Command B, you could, I guess, choose to maybe for a long press, enable Command B with a left button press. That might be something that you decide to add to yours. Moving on to the gear selector. So here in the gear up position, we send the gear up event. Then we put in 4 delays of 5 seconds. And the reason for that is I wanted 20 seconds, but I can only do a maximum of 5 at a time, and they compound. So 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds later, we're going to send the gear lever event left mouse button click. And so what happens is now after 20 seconds, the gear will have stowed and been away. We will move the gear lever into the off position on the panel. So again, that's more for the virtual the VC and having it go into the place you want. And then for gear down, all we had to do was send the standard SimConnect gear down event. On our LEDs, we've went ahead and we've set up annunciators for the LEDs. Looking at these, what you'll see is that we set up a LED for gear locked 1 as well as gear transit 1. So if both of those are in 0, then the LED will be off. If the locked one, do green. If the in transit one, do red. If they're both lit up, let's set the LED to yellow. And so we did that for the nose wheel, which is the zeros. So again, I did all of these first as zeros, copied, pasted, and then just came in and changed all the conditions one by one from the locked 0, transit 0 to the locked 1, transit 1. Copy, paste, change them to 2s. So I decided with these switches, we were going to start on the left, and my leftmost switch is my parking brake switch. So parking brake off, parking brake on, and as you can see, we've also got the parking brake LED working. Next switch, we decided to put the auto throttle arm switch on here. Since there isn't a switch on this for auto throttle, I chose this to be my auto throttle switch. Then I put flight director left side, I put flight director right side. So flight director left, flight director right. So you have your captain and first officer flight directors. Next up, I decided to do an AutoBrake switch. So again, we don't have an AutoBrake selector, and I decided to try something a little bit fun. So here what we're doing is we're actually checking a condition that the sim is on the ground. And if the sim is on the ground, we're going to set the AutoBrake to 0, which would be RTO, or rejected takeoff. Then, if the sim is not on the ground, so if the plane's in the air, when we turn this switch into the on position, I chose to set the selector to 3, which is going to be AutoBrake 2. And then no matter what position it's in, whether it's on the ground or in the air, when you set the switch to off, it will set the AutoBrake selector to parameter 1, which happens to be the off position. So that's pretty cool. We're using conditions to decide to send 2 different events. Over here, I wanted to align the IRSs, and so this is on the overhead panel. So what I did for these was on a switch on event, it's going to set the IRU MSU left to parameter 1. So that's going to put it into align mode. And then after 20 seconds, I have it flipping it into nav mode. When we switch off, it will set the IRS left to 0, so the off position. And then I copied and pasted those 2 events, and then I changed it to the right IRU, so it'll do the same thing, align. So yes, we're moving both switches simultaneously because next up I wanted to put the stab trim events onto this switch. So the stab trim events, so we need to first, when it goes into the up position, we need to first move the switches into the up position. And then what we need to do is wait half a second, and then we move the guards, the protection guards, up as well. When the switch is turned off or in the down position, we're first going to move the guards to parameter 1, so the guards will open up. We'll wait half a second for the guards to flip open, and then we'll set the switches to 1, which will push the switches down on the control pedestal. For the flaps lever, I decided to map that to the Autopilot disengage bar because it's like a paddle. So up, we'll reset it. Down, we'll push the whole bar down. Finally, we set up the annunciators. In the 737, there isn't really a master warning annunciator, so I haven't assigned anything here. Feel free to pick from one of the many other annunciators for these. Master caution, of course, there is a master caution. And for that, similar type thing. We added an event, and it's change button light, and it's going to ask us for a condition. So for the condition, I simply added a condition, I highlighted the NGXU, and then I just typed in caution, and you'll see that, well, master caution 0, which would be the left side or the captain's side. Master caution 1 would be the right side or the first officer's side. So I grabbed caution 0. When it equals 0, turn off the caution light. Then I copied, pasted, and I changed the value to a 1. And then I changed the LED to on and permanent. So we mapped fire to the fire, nothing to vacuum. So again, another one that you could repurpose for yourself. For low oil pressure, I decided to map this to the APU's low oil pressure because that's an annunciator we could find. It was the only one when I searched for it. For the hydraulics, we've had to go a little bit bigger. So what happened here is we grabbed all 4 of the low pressure for electric 0, electric 1, electric engine 0, engine 1. When those are all zeros, so those are AND condition bindings, so they all have to be off for the LED to be turned off. If any of them, so we used an OR condition, so we just copy pasted the thing, flip this to OR, it all changes to OR, change these to 1s. So if it's an OR, any one of these is lit up, we're going to turn that hydraulic pressure on permanently as well. We did the same thing for the fuel pressure. All 6 fuel pressure, low pressure warning annunciators. If they're all off, we set it off. If any of them are on, we set it on. Aux Fuel Pump. I couldn't find an annunciator for the Aux Fuel Pump, so for now I've left that unmapped. Anti-ice, so there is the anti-ice glare shield annunciator, so I mapped it to that. So if there's anything to do with anti-ice that is faulty, it's going to give us our glare shield annunciation. Parking brake, so we went to the control stand trim annunciators dot parking brake, and we're using the parking brake 0 and 1 to set the parking brake. For the starter engaged, I'm using the FS to crew start valve 0 and 1. So ironically, the annunciators that will come on in the panel, in the screens, there are FS to crew LVARs that they set, so FS to crew, I guess, would know about it. So I'm using those, same concept. If they're both an AND, the starter will be off, and if either one is one, the starter will be lit up to tell us that the starter is engaged. For low volts, we're using the battery discharge annunciator. There wasn't really a separate low volts, so I chose the battery discharge to turn that on and off. For the APU, there is a glare shield warning annunciator APU, so if there is a issue with the APU, that will come up on the glare shield annunciator panels, and I think that one's actually on the first officer side. So again, APU, light, LED on and off. And for the doors, there's 9 of these things, and these are the SP2 annunciators. So in the middle of the overhead panel, if any of these doors or lights on the overhead panel turns on, we'll also turn them on here. If I go ahead and I have this set to altitude, now when we're turning the knob, my altitude is increasing, and you see that on the MCP. If we were to set it to a VS and enable VS mode, so VS goes on, VS is lit up, and so now I've got that mouse wheel up and mouse wheel down functionality. So then we've got our heading mode, or our heading selector, and as you can see, that is working excellent. You got your autopilot master arm, so we could turn the autopilot command A on if we wanted to, and then like we said, we've got our disengage bar we mapped to the paddle, so that's all available as well. And then here I've got my parking brake, so you see the parking brake go off, parking brake goes on, you see the LED go on in the cockpit, LED goes on here. Auto throttle, we could auto throttle engage. So if we want to set our auto throttle, we've got it with a switch. We got our flight directors, and then as mentioned, you'll see in the middle of the screen the RTO switch. goes into RTO mode because it knows we're on the ground. And of course, we've got our speed brake in the down position. We can put it into the speed brake armed, and then just like we were mentioning, we've got our flaps. So there's flaps 2, and we see the indicator moving to the flaps 2 position, and I set it to the middle for flaps 5. It moves into the flaps 5 position, and it's set up for flaps 5, so that works great. We've got our throttles. So throttles moving in the perfect position. We've got our reversers, and then as you can see, waits that 2 seconds and then opens them wide up. And so now, and we're going to start going backwards here. And then when we put them down, they fall down, and then they fully stow. So that covers all of what we're doing here with the Bravo switches. And then, like I said, if I put this into the detent, you see our cutoff switch go off, pull it out of the detent, and our cutoff switch goes to the idle position. And of course, our caution just came on, so we see our master caution light has just come on. And if we clear our master caution, we see the light go out on here as well. So we'll go ahead and we'll try to take off from this very strange position to show what happens with the gear. So there we go, gear's going up. And of course, if you look outside, we see that gear going up. The gear goes inside. And now our LEDs have gone off. We don't need to go like a rocket ship. And of course, we can trim the wheels just like it would take a while to trim. Or we can use our electric trim. And then as you saw, after 20 seconds, the gear lever moves into the off position. Go ahead and get our flaps out of the way. And power comes back. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set our heading bug. So we've got our heading bug, and we're going to hit autopilot. And so now we're in heading mode, and we can go ahead and do altitude hold. So we'll go ahead and grab our current altitude. Well guys, that's about gonna do it for this one. I know it was a long one, but hey, there's a lot to do on the Bravo throttle quadrant. As always guys, if you liked it, please go ahead, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and come along on the next one. I guess we're gonna have to get into the SciTech or Logitech panel and set that unit up. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.